Remember when Carson would like do that thing with a pencil? Like he'd come back and he'd be like, doing a syncopated rhythm with the band with Doc Severinsen. Last time I saw Doc Severinsen, he was peeing on his own leg at Carnegie Hall in the men's room for the Richard Lewis concert, which I told Richard Lewis about. Um, Happy Hump Day. This is Wednesday, August 20th. Hump Day is like something if you have an office job um, that people talk about. I haven't had an office job since I want to say 1991 or something. 1991, I had the last office job I had. But everyone always talked about Wednesday. Like if you can make it through Wednesday, you could somehow get to Friday and then go crazy. But it wasn't an issue for me because when I was at National Lampoon, every day was Wednesday. That being said, we have a new series starting tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm in LA, so it's a 3 hour difference from the East Coast. And apparently, we've got people around the world now for this thing. So dig this. We're going to start doing a series, and then I think next week, we got Jackie the Joke Man coming on with all his Howard Stern dirt, which will be fun. But we're going to do this series called The Secret Lives of So and So. And it's going to be mostly stand-up comics. We're going to do, Lenny Bruce. We're going to do today George Carlin. We're going to get into Andy Kaufman. We're going to get into Sam Kinison. We're going to get into all the different stand-up comics. We're going to do more. We're going to do people like, Henny Youngman. We're going to do all these people that you think you know, but you don't know. And we're going to dig out their secret lives, which to me is fascinating. A lot of the stuff I've known and a lot of the stuff I don't know. The stuff about Carlin today is just absolutely shocking. This may go a little long because he has a career that's 60 years. I mean, some of these guys died young, so the shows could be shorter. But this one will not. This one about George Carlin is fascinating because he's in there in the top 5 stand-ups of all time, revered by many. Recent documentary by Judd Apatow, 2022 on HBO, which was the American Dream, I guess, George Carlin's American Dream, which we'll get into. We're going to try to cram everything in today. But first, a word from our sponsor. The sponsor is Biltong USA. This stuff is gold. I've been eating it. This is the real spicy one. I don't know if it's really spicy, but anything spicy to me is spicy. And this is the one that I really like, which is like the filet mignon one, the wagyu one. This one is really gold. The other one's great, but this is my favorite. And apparently, you get 10% off. Don't ask me how he does it, but the king of Bilton, who's his cat Anton down in Texas, um, he is the guy that brought Biltong to Texas. So he transitioned from a career in IT. He was in the field to the food industry, had a passion for preparing food after his wife, Nicole, hinted that they wanted to start something in the food industry a few years. Anton's African cuisine was born in 2018. Then he found some place to do it, launching it as a restaurant, Anton's as a restaurant in 2019. Steep learning curve. They had their third child in 2019. They have 17 children now, all working, violating child labor laws. Um, Nicole left her job in the medical field 2020. So these people came from South Africa and they brought these recipes with them, including meat pies, breads, and baked goods. Farmer's sausage, which is Boer Wars or something. I thought the Boer Wars were the Dutch fighting the tall guys. But that's how much I know about South African culture. Anyway, these things are ready to eat out of the bag, which is what I like about them. And it's great for watching the Dodgers beat the Padres this weekend. I went through an entire bag of it. For centuries before settlers arrived on the shores of South Africa, there were two groups of people that inhabited the land. And these two people were skilled hunter gatherers, but they needed dry meat. They had to go around, and they came up with this biltong, was given by Dutch settlers, bill meaning meat and tong meaning strip. The words refer to a strip of meat for those who are wondering what the hell that is. But it is super, super duper gourmet. It's like, I don't know, it's like the freshest, greatest beef jerky you've had times 10. It's been around for centuries. It's beef, vinegar, spices, air dried over time, flavor and nutrients, extremely high protein if you want to lose weight, and tons of B vitamins in here. This will replace potato chips. This will replace your bread. This will hopefully, with the amount of potassium, magnesium, and zinc that's in there, it's a great snack for any carnivore, keto, paleo, high performance diets. This is the stuff to have. Ask for it by name, and if you go to Biltong USA, put in the code Mark G, and you get 10% off. He's also got other stuff in there, which if you look at the menu at biltongusa.com, you can pick out. And that means pastries and chocolate and stuff like that, all with a South African twist. But now they're in Texas, so it's going to have a Texas South African twist. So I don't know what these new Americans are going to be called, but they're coming here and hopefully to freedom, which is what they're coming here for, and freedom economically. And this guy's homeschooling his kids and living in, I think, Prairie, Texas. I'm not sure. They may have just moved. But support our sponsors. I'll come back at the end of the show with a little bit more about them. But right now, I I have a really big show, to quote Ed Sullivan, about the secret life of George Carlin. Now, the secret life of George Carlin starts like in 1937 in Washington Heights. Now, for people who don't know, Washington Heights, it's like Morningside, up there by Columbia University. It's the northern part of the island of Manhattan. Trinity College is up there, Teachers College. A bunch of different schools are right there. And in that niche, it's kind of like white Harlem. There's like Spanish Harlem, there's black Harlem, and this was considered white Harlem. It was Irish going back to the 1930s. And his father, he had a brother, an older brother named Patrick. Now, Patrick is about 6 years older than George, and George is born in 1937. That's Pat on the left, and you see somebody wrote me on the guy on the right, who is George Carlin. Now, George Carlin and Patrick Carlin are the only two kids of Mary and Patrick Carlin. Now, Patrick Carlin, the father, I got to get into this guy for a second here because he's a fascinating guy. At the height of the Depression, he would here he is with I think with the first child with Patrick. This is probably Riverside Park on the west side of Manhattan. Now, Patrick Carlin Sr. is an interesting guy, and I'll tell you why. He's born in Ireland in the 1800s, comes over here. At the height of the Depression, he's making over $1,000 a week. He is the national sales manager for the New York Post, the Sun, all these different newspapers. He becomes a public speaker and is paid to speak publicly. He gets into this Dale Carnegie public speaking world. He wins all these awards. And they're living in this multi bedroom apartment on Riverside Drive, which is the highfalutin part of the Upper West Side, with a black maid, multiple bedrooms, multiple rooms, overlooking the Hudson River. At the height of the Depression, like I said, he's making $1,000 a week take home, and they are living large. Unfortunately, he is a total alcoholic. He beats his wife, or he threatens to beat her. They're fighting all the time. He's an angel and goes to work. He's a workaholic. He's bringing down money. Mary, the wife, is living large. That's the mother of Patrick and George. They, she's not happy that the guy's drunk, but this family here, which is my family, I don't know how that got in there, but this is me on the left here at my brother's bar mitzvah. That's as long as we got this photo up here. That's me on the far left, my dad, my brother in the middle, and my younger brother on the right, my mother over there. And I think it's the bar mitzvah for that brother. I think we wanted to show this during the Larry Charles episode, but hey, there's the photo we were looking for. Now, that being said, getting back to George Carlin for a second, George Carlin's father, the mother escapes down a fire escape with the two children. Her brother is a cop. She comes from a family of cops. They're all Irish, a lot of drunks. The maybe we could show this picture, see what this one is. His picture of his mother. This is his mother, Mary, and this looks like the Upper West Side of Manhattan. That's young George there. Mary will take the two kids down the fire escape and escape to upstate New York, where he can't find them. It's something somehow confusing whether he was violent with her or hit her or not. But whatever the result was, he verbally and psychologically abused her. And she goes and gets a divorce, takes the two kids, and flees to upstate New York temporarily to hide out. Comes back to Manhattan with the two kids, gets an apartment, and begins to raise them as a single mom. Now, not only is she raising them as a single mom, she's got a brother. I just got to tell you about her brother, who's George's uncle, who they called the Admiral. He would take his clothes off on the subway and would be taken to a mental institution where he was then confined for the rest of his life as the Admiral. He couldn't keep his clothes on. This was her brother. So there's definitely mental illness and alcoholism in the family. But her and her sister both worked for, they were not impoverished. They worked these executive jobs for the Hearst publications. His mom, he's never really explained. The impression you get is that they lived in poverty, but they did not. With the dad, it was absolute luxury, top of the heap. And with the mom, she was the personal executive assistant to Paul West. Now, who is Paul West? Paul West was the president of the Association of National Advertisers, the biggest lobbying group in the advertising industry. And her sister, his aunt, also worked for Hearst Publications doing these executive jobs. But that being said, there was nobody at home. So she worked hours and hours a day in these executive jobs downtown Manhattan, midtown Manhattan, in the publishing area there and in the advertising area, while George and his brother had absolutely no oversight. The brother is a total criminal. George becomes a total criminal. And I mean, they look. Here's the two again, but you know, he does things that you think are beyond hijinks. They're beyond. In other words, kids from Columbia University will be playing tennis on the courts at Riverside Park, and they'll rob their wallets and pants of their jackets that they left there on the side, stealing their wallets. They would make zip guns. He was in a gang called the Gripers, and they had jackets and Debs who were girls. Now, that being said, my mother was a Deb. She was in the Lords of Flatbush, so it's not completely insane. However, these two brothers, without any male supervision, have the city and can run wild. So yeah, here's the group. She sends them to a Catholic school across the street, but it's so liberal and it's so progressive that they they don't, even though he's known for his bits on Class Clown for all these different things about abuse. There was no abuse. It was boys and girls together. There were no uniforms. There was no report cards. It was based on John Dewey's system of education across the street from Teachers College and Columbia University. It was the most progressive, far left school, Catholic school in America at that time. And because of that, they learned absolutely nothing. They mocked religion. They, again, the whole point of this school is bizarre because it is a Catholic school where all of the kids just ran amok, and there was no discipline. There was no report cards. There was no grades. This became, prominent in the 70s and 80s in certain private colleges, but this school, this high school, already had that implemented, and he had even less discipline. So, I mean, let me just tell you the crimes of George Carlin. First of all, at a high school basketball game, he went into the locker room and stole everybody's wallets out of their locker, the basketball players. Okay. He then goes on this camping trip. It's like a camp for college, called Notre Dame Camp for high school or elementary and all the grades together for the summer in upstate New York. And he takes a first place medal in comedy sketches, and he treasured that medal for the rest of his life. He goes into town and goes into the grocery store and robs. film and gets caught and gets kicked out of the camp. They have to take him back to they have to take him back to New York. He at 15, I don't even know what to tell you here, but he eventually ends up going to George Washington High School, which is a public high school right by Yankee Stadium for people who know um, the city. I mean, very famous people went there. I mean, Harry Belafonte went there. Alan Greenspan went there. A lot of creative people went to George Washington. Henry Kissinger went to George Washington High School, if I remember correctly. But my favorite student of George Washington High School was a ball player named Manny Ramirez, who I followed when he was in high school. He was hitting 650 every season for 4 years, and later signed with I think Cleveland. I don't know how the Yankees didn't get Manny Ramirez, but one of the greatest baseball players in high school I've ever seen. High school, but getting back to George Carlin at 15. He quits school. He's on his own, doesn't give a shit, and takes this girl to the prom. I don't know if you got a picture of this girl, Mary. Mary becomes his prom date, and he takes her to the prom and gets engaged to her at the age of 15. But then he joins the Air Force. And where he joins the Air Force, he says, to avoid the draft. He Yeah, here's a picture of him. He is only determined to use the GI Bill afterwards to go to college to become a DJ or go to a vocational school and become a DJ, right? Um, Mary Catherine was the girl that he got engaged to. I don't even know what happened to her. But Carlin is sent to the Air Force Base near Shreveport and Lackman Air Force Base, I think it is. I forget the actual name of it. Near Shreveport, and there he continues to fuck up. He gets Lackland Air Force Base. Is that what it is? Um, he gets court-martialed 3 times. He gets all these different demerits over and over and over again. He gets a stripe, loses a stripe, and then he all of a sudden it gets 5 Article 15s, whatever that means. 5 of them, if anybody knows that in military, Barksdale Air Force Base. I take that back, Barksdale, near the old Red River. If you cross that old Red River, Hoss, he's 18 and he's down there. But across the river, which I think is Shreveport, across the river, there is a radio station, Radio KJOE. And he goes in there and somehow finagles a job and a radio show out of these guys literally in 1 second. The guy just has a AM 1460 for people down in Shreveport. I think it's a big station, and they were one of the first stations to play rock and roll, and really, were cutting edge and huge at the time. Why they hired this guy from New York is beyond me, but he was a total hustler. He reads some copy, gets the job, and the Air Force doesn't mind. They allow him to go to work there at night, and he does like the overnights, introducing different acts and doing the news and the weather and developing that whole DJ radio personality, which he later used in his stand-up comedy. Um, he meets a guy. He goes to Boston from there after this radio station, and he goes to Boston to another radio station because you want to go to a bigger market. All he wants to do is become a DJ, become a comic, and become Danny Kaye. He has a 3-part plan from the age of 11. This is so insane. He literally goes down to Broadway shows every night and gets autographs of famous people. He waits at the door of the Broadway shows to meet them and talk to them and see if they can help him. But that's what he wants to be, Danny Kaye. And Danny Kaye was a big star, musicals, singing, dancing, the whole nine. He feels that if he can become a DJ and then a stand-up comic, and then that will lead to him being a movie star. Very simple plan. So he goes to Boston, and it's WEZE, I think, out of Boston. He meets a guy named Jack Burns, and Jack Burns becomes his sidekick. Jack Burns, by the way, Carlin, at this time, his family is all Republican. He worships Joe McCarthy. He's a vicious anti-communist, hates the commies, and his whole family is Republicans. Not unusual. But at one point, he interrupts jokingly interrupts like Tchaikovsky playing on a record, and he says it's time to bomb Red China, and this gets him into some trouble in Boston, not because of the crazy statement, it was because they probably worship Red China. He hooks up with with Jack Burns. Here's a picture of Jack Burns on the left and George Carlin on the right. Jack Burns will later hook up with Avery Schreiber and become a much bigger act as Burns and Schreiber. They will tour, but right now he's with George Carlin, and these two begin to hit it off. They start working the radio station. They go to KXOL in Fort Worth. If people are in Texas who know KXOL, big station, and they begin to perform at a place called the Cellar. And the Cellar is part of the JFK history because that's where the Secret Service agents lost their guns the night before the assassination, got drunk, and lost their IDs, among many other things, which we have on the other channel if you want to look at that episode. But right now, these guys in 1959, 1960 are working the Cellar and honing their craft as a duo. And eventually they will go together, and they're doing really well. They have radio jobs in and doing this nighttime performance stuff. So they get the idea to go to Hollywood like everybody else, and they get in the car. They have $300 they've saved up, and they go to Hollywood. And they figure they're going to not work any day jobs. They're just going to work show business jobs. They're determined to do that. So they go to a station called KDAY, K-Day in Hollywood, and they get immediate jobs there, working on radio. It's kind of interesting how quickly these guys become like made men in Hollywood. They begin performing at Cosmo Alley, which is the coffee shop circuit. There's a place called Cosmo Alley, which Lenny Bruce performed at, and Folkies. It was kind of like a folk coffee shop, comedy place. And they begin to hone their craft together as a team. And this is short lived because Carlin's goal is to get rid of Jack Burns. I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, Jack Burns will later come into a story which we do with Larry Charles. He ends up, being on Fridays with Larry Charles and Larry David and Andy Kaufman. Jack Burns became a legend by himself. But right now he's with Carlin, and they break up. And Carlin, the reason Carlin gets fired from the Boston station, by the way, is he took the news van down to Harlem to buy weed. And there was a prison break at Walpole, and there was no news truck. And that was the end of Carlin at the Boston station. Anyway, so they're performing as a duo, and who comes in but Lenny Bruce? And Lenny Bruce digs the act, and Lenny Bruce has the same agent that he as Mort Saul, I think, at that time, GAC, which was General Artist Corporation. In fact, my dad was an agent for them and handled Stephen Edie Gourmet and some of the other people. But Lenny was there. Here's a picture of Lenny, the serious acting Lenny, Lenny movie star Lenny shot. There's a couple other Lennys that we will learn to know. We will know later when we do the Lenny Bruce episode. But here's Lenny on the phone. Lenny, obviously calling his lawyer there. I think this was in an airport where he was kicked out of England for obscenity. But anyway, Lenny comes in, and this is really weird. Like part of their bit was to impersonate, or part of Carlin's bit was to impersonate Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul. And I don't mean just impersonate them. I mean copy their bits word for word. And I have a tape of it. And for the life of me, I don't understand what it means. He is an impeccable mimic, George Carlin. Here's a picture of Mort Saul. He does two bits on this album, this album that they recorded back then, which was recorded at Cosmo Alley, but it was called Burns and Carlin at the Playboy Club Tonight. It came out in 1963, but it was recorded in 1960, and it wasn't the Playboy Club. It was Cosmo Alley. And two of the bits at the end of the record, from 1960 is George Carlin impersonating Lenny Bruce, doing his dingy in the candy store bit, word for word. I don't understand it, but he was impeccable. And apparently Lenny got a kick out of it. And then Mort Saul came in and heard him doing himself, Mort Saul. So I don't know if we have a picture of the album cover, but it's I don't remember seeing the album. It was originally released as the original George Carlin, but may have come out later. Some of these are a little out of whack chronologically, but because of record deals and things of that nature and re-releases with different dates on them. But anyway, Lenny calls up his agent and tells them to sign Burns and Carlin. So now they have an agent. Carlin gets rid of Burns, and Carlin um, goes to December 1962. He goes to the gate of the Horn, not as a performer, but as a fan of Lenny Bruce. And Lenny Bruce gets busted. And interestingly enough, at this particular bust in Chicago, Lenny, of course, was mocking the Catholic Church and religions and everything else that Lenny did. And you could hear the recording, which I have, um, of the police coming in, just like cops going, "All right, everybody, the show's over. The show's over." But the two jazz guys, this horn player and a piano player, just keep playing this exit music as people are being kicked out of the club with the lights on. Lenny's arrested. And these two guys are sitting upstairs, drunk. And one of them's George Carlin with a friend of his drinking, and they refuse to leave. They're the last people to leave. And the cops, Chicago police, are checking everybody's ID to see if anybody's underage. So Carlin famously refuses to show ID, saying, quote, "I don't believe in ID." So the cop goes, "All right, a wise guy, huh?" And throws him in the back of the paddy wagon with Lenny Bruce, his idol. And Lenny kind of knows him because he had seen him, and got him an agent. So he says, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I wanted to meet you." And he says, "What are you, some kind of a schmuck or something? Who the hell does this?" And Lenny starts laughing because the guy got arrested on purpose just to have an intimate moment with Lenny Bruce, who will become his mentor, not individually, but he will become his idol, was probably a better word. Lenny was not into mentoring anybody, but Carlin worshipped Lenny Bruce. And Mort Saul, but Lenny Bruce more so than Mort Saul. So anyway, so in March of 1963, Carlin sets up shop as a couple of weeks run at the Cafe A Go Go in Greenwich Village, and instead of exploring comedy like other people did, he works on a 6-minute TV act. Nobody did this back then. Nobody was that far-sighted. Nobody was that structured. Nobody was that ambitious to do what Carlin was doing. And he worked on the same thing every night while people were doing all kinds of experimental comedy and whatever. Lenny Bruce was in there. John Coltrane was in there. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on in there. But he creates a bit called the Indian Sergeant. And the Indian Sergeant becomes his calling card for TV. And the Indian Sergeant is a 6-minute bit where the sergeant of the Indians is a guy with a heavy duty Irish accent who's like the military harsh sergeant, but he's an Indian, and he's getting the troops ready to attack the fort. And that's the bit. And he just keeps asking if they're ready. We're going to go tonight, and Chief Running Bull's coming, and it's going to be vicious, and this whole long thing. That is extremely funny. If you can find that bit on YouTube, I highly recommend it. But this becomes the calling card to get George Carlin onto the Merv Griffin show in 1965. Merv Griffin had a daytime show, one of the bigger daytime shows, former big band singer. For people who don't know who Merv Griffin was, he later took me to federal court saying that I stole Jeopardy, the game he owned, by doing Sexual Jeopardy, the home game. And the judge held up my Lampoon article in court laughing and threw it out under parody law. But Merv Griffin loved comedy. And he didn't love my comedy, but he apparently loved George Carlin's comedy. And he goes on there and he kills. And he does this Indian sergeant bit. He goes over to now on Mike Douglas. And Mike Douglas has a competitive show out of Philly, the same as Merv Griffin. They're competitors, so he's doing it on multiple shows, and he keeps repeating it. And he's terrified on Mike Douglas. He's run out of material, but he's totally afraid of the producer of the Mike Douglas show, this huge fat guy who intimidates everyone. And some of you people may know him by his name, Roger Ailes. He will later create Fox News. But at this point, he is the producer of the Mike Douglas show, but still quite an intimidating figure. Um, well, 12 days, this is into 1966. He gets a break. He's offered jobs as a regular writer on the Kraft Summer Music Hour. You know, some of these variety shows. He begins to work all these different variety shows as a writer performer. This one was hosted by, I don't know if you guys remember, John Davidson. Um, he gets, these gigs, and he's doing one or two bits, but he doesn't have that much material. January 1967, he does the Ed Sullivan Show, but in 66, in season one, he does a episode of That Girl with Marlo Thomas. I don't know if people remember the show That Girl. It was before Mary Tyler Moore. She was Mary Tyler Moore. Here's a picture of George playing George Esther, her agent, in this episode, and he was damn good. I got to tell you, that's Marlo Thomas on the right. It's set in Manhattan. She's a mod swinging girl who works in advertising or something. Oh no, she's a struggling actress. I take that back. And this is her agent. He was really good. He was the angles, the bits, the sarcasm. I was quite surprised. 1966, how good Carlin was. Now, keep in mind, 12 days into 66, he goes and gets his first Vegas gig, which is at the Flamingo Hotel. And he is supposed to do 19 minutes. And the reason Carlin became such a fanatic about time of bits was because of this episode in 1966 at the Flamingo, which was a mob joint, obviously. He went over like to 22 minutes. He went over 3 minutes, and he goes into the dressing room afterwards, and this big guy comes in and says, "If you ever go over again, I'm going to break your fucking legs." And he says, "What?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "We lost tens of thousands." He gives them the exact number. "By you keeping these people in this theater for 3 additional minutes, 2,500 people not gambling cost us X amount of money in revenue." And he never thought about it before. And of course, the guy was right. And he said, "If you ever do it again, we'll break your fucking legs." And that's why Carlin became a fanatic of timing all his routines with a stopwatch. He really was crazy. But in January of 67, he gets to do the Ed Sullivan Show. And here's a kid who used to stand outside the Ed Sullivan Theater, which now eventually became the Stephen Colbert home. It's going to be empty again shortly. But he stood outside the Ed Sullivan Theater getting autographs of famous people. And now he is going to be performing at the Ed Sullivan Show with Nipsey Russell, Mel Torme, the Velvet Fog, Woody Herman, and a group called Your Father's Mustache, which I vaguely remember. Um, yeah, his first out, he says about interestingly enough, he says about Ed Sullivan. It's the worst gig you could ever get. He stands on the side of the stage off camera with his arms folded, not laughing. And the audience comes dressed up in minks and gowns, thinking they're going to be on TV, which occasionally they are, because Ed Sullivan would put celebrities in the audience and the camera would show the audience. So the audience didn't know whether to laugh or not laugh because Ed Sullivan would never laugh. It was a comic's nightmare. I mean, we'll get into it with Jackie Mason when we do The Secret Life of Jackie Mason, banned from TV for giving Ed Sullivan the finger right after his performance. Of course, the Jim Morrison situation with Light My Fire. I mean, a lot of people know these stories, but this is his first performance, and he pulls it off, but he's not happy about it. He'll come back 3 more times that same year. Um, his first album comes out, which is Takeoffs and Put-Ons, which was recorded at a club called the Rooster Tail, if I remember correctly, in Detroit, 1967. That's really the first legit album, which may look like this. I'm not sure if we have. Yeah, this is the actual, and that's what he looked like back then. I don't know how much it sold, but he will later get a lot of gold records. He takes his first film role. There's a picture of him there. Oh, that's interesting. Takes his first film role with a film with Doris Day and Brian Keith in 1968 called "With Six You Get Egg Roll." I don't know if anybody remembers that one. Two big families, divorcees coming together. He plays this car hop dude, like at a restaurant, ye old drive-in or something, and he's got like one of those hats on, those white hats that they'd wear at a car hop, and he does the bit. He's really good. He's in it like three or four or five times. He keeps coming up. The guy comes up to the window. Here he is. Yeah, there's a picture of him right there. He's really good in this. Doris Day, dark period of time for her career, but it's one of these studio pictures that were being cranked out by the studios in the late 60s, trying to salvage some sort of hold on the American public. But Carlin is now getting closer to his dream of being Danny Kaye, because this is how there. Yeah, there's a good shot of it. Yeah, I think that's in between takes. And he's really flummoxed by this whole movie thing because he didn't know. He says in his autobiography, he did not know it would be this complicated. The lighting and this and hitting your mark and staying out of the other person's line and all these different things. He had no clue how complicated it was, and he's really dismayed about it. So he goes back to Vegas. First, he goes to Chicago to Mr. Kelly's, and Mr. Kelly's in October 1969. Mr. Kelly's a famous club in Chicago, comedy club and jazz club. That week in October 1969, the straight George Carlin comes to an end. Do we have this picture of Lenny getting busted with George Carlin in the background? There's a picture of George Carlin's very, very obscure photo. George Carlin's head sticking out of a door while Lenny's in a raincoat being pulled out by police. I don't know if we have that. Maybe, maybe not. Oh, no, that's Lenny in England. Lenny there, maybe somewhere later in the show. Okay, so there's a girl named Brenda, and Brenda works in a comedy club in Dayton, Ohio. And Lenny Bruce would go to this club, and she would pick him up at the airport. And George Carlin went to that club, and he starts dating Brenda. And Brenda is going to be his girlfriend and then his wife pretty soon. And she's a really sharp looking blonde who's actually pretty funny and witty. Uh, Lenny liked her, but he didn't really go out with her. This is a picture, I think, from their wedding, which is 1961 in June. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's Brenda there. He marries her and takes her on the road with him, kind of makes her his assistant. And she's into it. I mean, they're madly in love with each other. She goes with him on all the gigs. They're literally living in his car. Um, they have no money. They have no house. At one point, they go back to New York and live in the same building as his mother on 183rd Street or something. And they get an apartment there, and he's going to the village trying to work on his act. But he is beginning to change because the culture is starting to change. And he's starting to, even though, just keep in mind, he has, by his own admission, smoked pot all day, every day since he was 13 years old. I know this is hard for people to get their minds around. Uh, Not that I did it, but there are people who do it. I mean, there are the Bill Maher's, and there are the people who have been waking and baking, since the beginning of their childhood, their teenage years. And he's one of them. And he begins to create these characters that are kind of on the edge, like the hippy dippy weatherman, who's clearly a pothead. and he gets onto Carson, and people are starting to know that these characters are really lightly disguised versions of drug humor, because you can't really come out and say this stuff um, at that time, 1968, 1967, 1969. Uh, but he's really getting fed up with the culture itself. He marries this girl, and he appears to be this straight edge guy. And I'll tell you this: he goes to Vegas, and at this time in the '60s, from his stand up, this is he gets married, and he's doing the stand up, and he's doing Vegas, and he's making, and this is kind of unbelievable. He's making $12,500 a week at these places. Insane money. In today's money, he would be making $2.2 million a year just from stand up in these clubs. In the not in the clubs, in the Vegas hotels, to separate it for the people at home. And he doesn't like it. He doesn't like the audience. He doesn't like being there. He doesn't like the people. He is stoned. He doesn't want to do it anymore. So he finds a new drug, which is sweeping the country in 1969 in October. He finds acid. LSD. Not only does he take LSD, he takes LSD 10 times during a 2-week run at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago. And then starts doing bizarre things, expanding his mind, expanding his humor, expanding his repertoire. He goes to the Copacabana in 1969, and this is a mob joint. This is the highest level restaurant performance center in New York, in the dinner theater world. But it's completely a mob place, and it's run very, very strictly. And he lays on the stage underneath the piano, counting and speaking the words that are on the bottom of the piano, begging to be fired. And he can't get fired because he's got like a 3-week run, and he wants out. And they're just saying, no, we're not letting you out and paying you. So he works the entire 2-week engagement in this Dada esque comedy that he is tripping on acid at the Copa with mob gangsters wanting to kill him. Uh, he then, after he does get fired, which does happen, they lower the lights and turn off the microphone at one point, and the mob's going to kill him. In January '69, he does the Jackie Gleason show. And on that Jackie Gleason show, again, he starts to mock the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover. And this is not simply done. Because of that, the show gets calls from the FBI after the show, and the FBI opens up a file on George Carlin. Now, it's not a big file, but he does have a file now. And he's starting to grow his hair a little bit longer, right? So he goes back to the Frontier Hotel now in Vegas, where he starts yelling at the audience, and he does a bit, an innocuous bit, saying, "I've got no ass, man." And he does it as these black guys in the service who said to him that he had no ass, that he really didn't have an ass. And they would go like, "Yo, what's happened to your ass, bro? There's no ass." And he does that thing, and because he says the word ass, he is fired by the guy who runs the Frontier Hotel. Now, the Frontier Hotel is owned by an obscure guy named Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes has a henchman named Robert Mayu. And people in the Kennedy genre may remember Robert Mayu, who was working for the CIA and attempting to kill Castro, and brought in the mob to. Robert Mayu was the go-between for the CIA to kill Castro during the Bay of Pigs era in '62 and '61. So Robert Mayu tells Carlin, "You're fired, and don't bother coming back." So Carlin is flabbergasted. He wasn't trying to get fired. He literally says the word ass and gets fired. He didn't know what the limit was, but he's making so much money that he buys his own private jet. Doesn't rent one. He buys a private jet and starts flying around the country to different gigs. And now he gets into a new substance called cocaine. And he has so much money that the amount of cocaine he does is beyond anything anybody's ever recorded. He just buys it like it's going out of style. In 1970, he's playing the Wisconsin Playboy Club, Lake Geneva, I think it was. And he starts yelling about Nixon and poverty and the press, and the audience starts booing him, and he's fired again. This is owned by Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner, right? Yeah, not Howard Hughes. It's owned by Hugh Hefner in Chicago. And he's fired, and he's in his hotel room at the place, and the audience tries to break down the door to kill him. And there's nowhere to go because he's no longer employed by the Playboy Club of Lake Geneva. And they're outside his windows, they're pounding on his door, they know which room he's in, and he's shitting bricks. And he calls up his agent, who's calling up Hugh Hefner in Chicago. And Hefner says, I can't do anything about it. I got to live with these guys. And he escapes with the skin of his chin. But the cocaine becomes so bad that him and his wife, Brenda, by the way, they now have a child named Kelly. And Kelly is now in the car with them. Kelly is now flying with them. Let's see a picture of the family here before we go any further. I just want to show you. This looks like a normal American family, right? But it's not. Brenda and George are complete cocaine addicts. They're out of their minds. Brenda will become a total alcoholic, and George will get to what happens to George. But this is Kelly. This is their one and only child, this girl. She will be a fixture in her life, and even today, post their lives. Kelly should have been removed by child services. Let me put it that way. But anyway, the two of them, the parents, get literally into cocaine psychosis, imagining people who are on their roof, people who are in their room. You have to do let me just tell you, as a drug counselor, to get cocaine psychosis where you're imagining people, uh, the amount of coke you have to do is, let me just say, enormous, really enormous. Because the reason nobody gets there is because nobody's got that kind of money. But he did. And here he is with the baby again. That's his wife on the left, Brenda. Um, they appear to be a normal couple, but again, they've got some issues. George is now abusing her physically, verbally. It's going back and forth. They're fighting over their coke stashes. They've got knives. The daughter is in the middle of it, a little bit older. The daughter at the age of 11 or 12, 1973. But let me just back up to 1972. July 21st, 1972, in Milwaukee, they have a thing called Summerfest. And our Milwaukee or Wisconsin followers know what I'm talking about when I say Summerfest. It used to be like a German Alps festival. I think it had a German name, but they went to court and changed it to Summerfest. And it's kind of like a carnival concert outdoor thing. Maybe we have a photo of a crowd there. There's like, just to show you the crowd, how big it was. There is like a rides in the middle. There's food. Look, this is the crowd at the Summerfest that he's playing. So they've got rock acts playing. They have a sound system that's enormous, and it goes back. This is not like Woodstock. This has tilt-a-whirl and rides, and in back of it, there's like a fairgrounds. It's right on a lake, um, and they have various acts there, and George is one of the acts. Well, George goes up and he does his new thing, 7 words you can never say on television. And the 7 words are going out from miles over the land. And there's children there with families and strollers because this is Summerfest. It's a wide open, massive event in the summer in Milwaukee. And people who are from Milwaukee know this better than I do. There are children, there are mothers, it's like a family thing, and there are hippies. So it's both. And this is what they're hearing in a massive rock and roll PA system. They're hearing shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits as loud as you could possibly say them. And if you know the routine, he goes over them over and over and over again in detail. Well, there's a cop there there's cops guarding the stage. And there's a cop with his family, with a young 3-year-old, with his wife, who are not even he's not even on duty, and he's flipping out. And he goes up to arrest Carlin. And the other cops go, look, wait till he's done, and then we'll pinch him and we'll take him down. Don't do it in the middle. Might start trouble. We're here to protect the acts, not to arrest them. But they all agree they're going to arrest him. And his wife, Brenda, comes out on stage with a glass of water in the middle of his act and whispers in his ear, the cops are going to arrest you the second you walk off stage to the right. Walk off to the left. And I know that your jacket in the dressing room has a gigantic bag of Coke. And he tells this guy from a blues band who opened for them um, that he should go in there and get the wife says, go in there and get his jacket and take that package out of his jacket, which he does. And he gives it to a roadie. He's holding some stuff that he gives to his wife. He drinks a glass of water as she's whispering in his ear. Now there's 35,000 people watching this in the middle of his routine, so it's kind of like a high wire act. He's high as a kite, obviously, and he exits stage left, and the cops pinch him. And we may have some photos of the arrest. I don't know if we still have these photos, but uh, this photo here, yeah, this is the actual bust. If we could look at that, that is Carlin being arrested by Milwaukee's finest. There may be another shot of this from another angle, but you get the idea. He's obviously gone full hippie at this point. He's wearing like thong shoes, jeans, t-shirt, protest buttons, and the cops take him to jail in Milwaukee, and he is kept in there for a number of hours. Even though they get like a top flight attorney who comes down there quickly, the cops don't want to let him go. They keep him there for hours, and he's not happy about it. But nevertheless, he gets arraigned in the morning, and it's held over for trial. Now, the case will eventually get thrown out because they get a good attorney who is a First Amendment attorney, and it's thrown out on First Amendment rights. But that's not the end. That's not the end of this story, because the situation with the seven words. We're going to get to this in a second, but let me just tell you what happens to the 10-year-old Kelly Carlin. In 1973, they go to Maui. And in Maui, they begin to fight with knives. Carlin and his wife, they're chasing each other around the cottage that they're staying at with knives, ready to kill each other. So the 11-year-old or 10-year-old, I think at that point, Kelly Carlin, draws up a peace treaty, writes it out, and gets her parents to sign it, saying they will not kill each other on this trip to Hawaii. However, George believes the sun is exploding, goes outside, and it's a different kind of sun than it is in LA, and calls up his friends in California to ask him if the sun is exploding. These are not normal drug reactions, people. These are reactions of drugs being abused at levels that I have never experienced, and most people have never experienced. So the situation is he goes and records AM/FM in Georgetown at the cellar door, and he doesn't like the way this is like his first legit album was called AM/FM, and on the AM side is his straight DJ stuff, and on the FM side is the new hippie guy. This is in 1972 in January, I believe. He records AM/FM. I don't know if you could see the. Oh, it's right in back of me. That blue cover there. That's him. That's AM/FM. Um, that becomes a gold record. That I think gets him a Grammy, or is in the run for a Grammy. Um, he's not happy about the recording. The recording is live. There's trucks outside. There's the cover of it. Goes outside and starts crying because he is a perfectionist. And I don't mean that in a good way. I mean in a crazy way. He writes out every single bit, times them out for his stage act. There's no ad libbing. I know it sounds like he's ad libbing. He hates ad libbing. He hates improvisation. He is a total perfectionist. There is no wiggle room in any George Carlin act or any George Carlin performance. Every single bit is so tight that he makes it seem like he's improvising, and he's not. And he hates anyone who improvises. And of course, Lenny Bruce improvised the shit out of stuff. And so did Mort Saul, and so did Shelley Berman, and so did a lot of these guys. But not George Carlin. He was extremely anal. He was taking Ritalin since he was a teenager. That was his drug of choice. And as I've said many times on the other channel, a lot of cocaine addicts start out with Ritalin in childhood and then begin to seek out meth and cocaine later in life. And he was one of the first examples of that. A strange thing happens in 1972 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. The Green Channel starts. The Green Channel shows a film called Sometimes a Great Notion, which was a Ken Kesey novel. It had Henry Fonda in it and Paul Newman. And this, in November 1972, in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, the Green Channel airs an uninterrupted, no commercial interruption, full movie. And the Green Channel becomes something called HBO. And HBO will come into George Carlin's life in a huge way, but not in 1972, because they are not doing anything with that yet. But they will begin to uh, play a major part in his life once they get into comedy. But on October 30th, 1973, in New York, on WBAI, which was listener supported radio, Pacific Radio, um, there was a show in the daytime called Lunch Pail. And the DJ or the host of that show, WBAI was a talk radio show, played off of not Class Clown, but he played it off of the second album that came out after Class Clown, which was called Fool, that had also had 7 words you couldn't say on television. By the way, the 7 dirty words was never said by George Carlin. That was written by an LA Times writer calling them dirty words. Carlin emphatically said they were not dirty words. That was part of the whole point of him saying it. But they play these 7 words you can't say on television. And a guy listening with his son, his young son, hears it and files a complaint with the FCC. Make a long story short, FCC sues WBAI Pacific Radio, and the case will go to the United States Supreme Court on First Amendment charges, and eventually, after a couple of stops off at lower courts, it ends up in a 5-4 SCOTUS decision with John Paul Stevens writing the majority opinion that these words are not obscene but indecent. And that opens up a whole new lane around the First Amendment. And the case is lost. The court bans the 7 dirty words. Yeah, it's the LA Times in a 5-4 decision. Not that Carlin was involved with this, he wasn't physically or legally involved in any way. This comes out in 1978, by the way, that's July 3rd. This landmark decision is because of his 7, as the LA Times called, the 7 dirty words you can't say on television: shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. And that becomes a whole new lane, which is now treated differently than the First Amendment. And that's kind of the footnote in American legal history for George Carlin. Lenny Bruce will have his own axe to grind with the legal system. We'll get into the Lenny things when Lenny's there. But in 1975, a new show on NBC begins to form or beginning to form. And it's run by, or it's going to be run by a guy named Lorne Michaels out of Canada, who had produced a couple of Lily Tomlin specials. And he cherry picks everyone from National Lampoon. And, as many people know, I was an editor of National Lampoon. This was a little bit before my time. I didn't start till 10 years after this in 1985, but this is 1975. And we had put on Lemmings, National Lampoon's Lemmings, and it had, Gilda Radner, it had Chevy Chase, it had John Belushi, Bill Murray, Brian Doyle Murray, and then Bill would show up once in a while. The albums were being produced there. We had a recording studio on the floor in the building that we ran on Madison Avenue. We didn't run the building, but we had a floor we controlled. And what Lorne Michaels did was he cherry picked all these guys because Matty Simmons was on pills at the time. and the owner, and was trying to make Hollywood movies and wasn't interested in these shows any longer. And Lorne Michael, he was working on Animal House, but in case anyone really wants to know, he was beginning to get that together with Universal Pictures. But Lorne Michaels goes in and cherry picks these cats, and they become the not ready for primetime players. And NBC is worried that Johnny Carson is going to be upset about this, and they go and get permission from Johnny Carson and blah blah blah. Make a long story short, they need a host. And he doesn't want to use, Lorne Michaels doesn't want to use the people he reveres as comics as the host because he feels that the first episode may be chaotic. And he does not respect George Carlin, who is now getting a reputation as a cokehead. But he doesn't want his show to go into the toilet either. He just doesn't want to use people he reveres like Richard Pryor and Lily Tomlin and this level of his, equals, according to, comedy history. Lorne Michaels wants to burn George Carlin, but he's also got a guy waiting in the wings named Billy Crystal. And Billy Crystal is supposed to do a couple of monologues. Carlin's supposed to be the host. Carlin is supposed to be in a sketch about either William the Conqueror or Henry VIII or uh, um, who went out and conquered the world. One of these guys, and it's written by Michael O'Donoghue, who also was an editor at National Lampoon right before this. He cherry picked Michael O'Donoghue out of the Lampoon editorial staff, and this sketch was this conqueror coming back to his class reunion. Dressed. It was a costume piece, a period piece. And at the last minute, Carlin says, I don't want to do it. And the whole thing gets canceled. And Carlin doesn't want to do it because he's been on a Coke run all week and he can't focus and he can't be in a sketch. He doesn't know how to do it. He doesn't give a shit. They make him wear a suit and tie. NBC threatens the 7-second delay button because Carlin can't be trusted. And Lorne Michaels doesn't trust him either. So they make Carlin wear a suit and not a tie, but a suit to make him look a little bit better. But the cast and crew doesn't talk to him all week. He is like persona non grata. Keep in mind, Carlin was a loner. He had no friends. He never had any friends. He didn't have friends professionally. He didn't hang out and kibitz with guys in the deli. He didn't hang out with other comics. He was a misanthrope, to be frank with you. And he did the show and he barely got through it doing these two monologues. And at the last minute, they canceled Billy Crystal, who almost in tears goes back to Long Island on the train. That being said, Saturday Night Live is launched with George Carlin, being in a suit and tie, and it becomes a cultural icon. Despite the 7-second delay, he was still, totally professional in the bit. But after it ends, they never bring him back until 1984, people, despite them saying, we'll bring you back. They never do. And they only bring him back when Lorne Michaels is gone. So he's out of work. He's got a bad reputation. He's groveling. He goes to Tony Orlando, who's got the most despised show on TV, Tony Orlando and Dawn. And he begs him for a job on Tony Orlando and Dawn. And Tony Orlando loves to have him because he's got the lowest rated show on TV. So Carlin gets a job after groveling, after all these things that he's done. He's now trying to get back to square one on a variety show. And he eventually gets fired from that or he quits, one or the other. But in the summer of 1977, HBO begins to debut comedy. And Carlin, in March of 77, records a show at USC, and that is his HBO debut. That is his first show that he has done. And that is the beginning of his series of, I think, 13 HBO specials. And by 1980, he, because of his lifestyle and because of his hijinks, this will be much later. This isn't 2022. This will come out way after he's dead. But that's the Judd Apatow documentary from 2022. But in 1980, Carlin owes the IRS over $2 million, and today that would be about $7.5 million. So he realizes he is now working for the United States government. Every single dollar he makes, they're getting like 50 to 60 cents out of it. And he begins to work, I want to say 150 to 200 dates a year, flying around the country to do these dates to pay off his tax debt. He's ostensibly, ironically, working for Uncle Sam. What an incredibly strange plot twist. In the summer of 1982, he has his first heart attack. He will have three of them. His heart affected by cocaine. Again, his father, who he never knew, died of a heart attack a number of years after he got divorced from his mother. So it may have been partly genetic. But Carlin was making at the hotels like 12,500 a week, and he didn't want to be in sitcoms, not for artistic reasons. Sitcom actors were making 1,500 a week. That's why he didn't want to be in these sitcoms. But eventually, we'll get to the fact that he does join one. 1984, he does Saturday Night Live. He comes back, and who's on there? It's Martin Short, Christopher Guest, and Billy Crystal. And he's very competitive. He's very jealous of these people, Carlin. He gets along with Martin Short, but he doesn't get along with Billy Crystal. And at the end of the show, he tells Billy Crystal, I can't wait to get into movies. I'm sure someday we'll do a movie together. And Billy Crystal looks at him and like just rolls his eyes, like, I'm going to do a movie with you, bro. Billy Crystal will soon do When Harry Met Sally and launch one of the biggest movie careers in comedy history. Carlin will do one called Outrageous Fortune with Bette Midler and Shelley Long. If people remember that, and has a bit part in there. But he is starting to become a punchline to a lot of jokes. In 1980, Rick Moranis does a parody of Carlin on the new show SCTV, and that devastated him. National Lampoon, the magazine, in the 80s, we had a phony letters column. It was letters to the editor, and we'd make them all up, jokey kind of letters. And we had him writing to the editors saying, I'm sorry that you've forgotten about me. I forget what it was, but it was not cool to be George Carlin at that point. He was really becoming the butt of jokes, and he needed to alter his career. So he begins to get political. He doesn't know anything about politics. The only person he ever voted for was 1972, George McGovern. He gets a subscription to Mother Jones. He gets a subscription to The Nation. He gets a subscription to The Realist, run by my friend Paul Krasner. And he begins to read. This started because of Jack Burns, who was a communist. Jack Burns had gone down to Cuba a number of times, actually met with Fidel Castro. And he tells this Republican, naive George Carlin all about progressive commie politics. And he begins to read these left-wing things. Instead of a balanced approach, he gets, I guess, what would be RDS today, Reagan dysfunctional syndrome, and he goes on a rant, Reagan derangement syndrome, like TDS, it's like RDS. He begins to go crazy about Ronald Reagan. And his politics, by the way, if you try to figure out his politics, the closest I could think of what Carlin's about is that he's an anarchist. He doesn't like the Democratic Party, doesn't like a third party, doesn't like the Republican Party, doesn't like liberals, doesn't like conservatives. He goes on and on and on. He just, in a very contrarian way, refuses to be pinned down. And as he gets longer and longer in his career, he begins to turn on the audience. In fact, he's fired, I believe, by the Frontier Hotel for yelling at the audience and calling them, mental morons and screaming at them. And a woman yells out, screaming, "Stop degrading us!" And they're storming out of the hotels. Uh, just crazy stuff that he's doing in Vegas, and he just keeps getting fired. Um, and it's not going it's not going well. He's kind of an anarchist, and he begins in 1981 to put out a thing called A Place for My Stuff on Atlantic Records. And this is the beginning of observational humor, a very Seinfeldian humor that Jerry says was an influence for him to do observational humor. And he tries to switch into this different mode because the parody by Rick Moranis really stung him. And he moves his mother in the mid 80s out to California. His mother's driving him insane. She's an alcoholic. He does a pilot for HBO called Apartment 2C. The pilot is a failure. It's got Rocco in it from The Godfather, who was Mo Green. Um, it was only one episode. It was a pilot, and they didn't pick up the pilot. But he does in 1987. He does Outrageous Fortune with Bette Midler and Shelley Long, and he plays this hippie guy in the Indian reservation. So there's no money in it, but he's kind of getting bit parts, and he goes to acting school in Santa Monica with a guy named Martin Book or something, who's a legitimate acting coach and really works with him, trying to get his acting chops together. But as he's doing this, there is a new breed of comedy coming down the pike. And this new breed of comedy that's coming down the pike of the Young Turks, keep in mind, comedy stores and comedy clubs are opening around the country. And he was only working in nightclubs or dinner clubs or dinner theater or hotels. There were no comedy clubs. And these new guys are coming out of comedy clubs, and they're very rowdy, they're very loud, they're very boisterous, they're very political, and they are the outlaws of comedy. Some of them out of Texas. Bill Hicks, of course, legendary out of Texas. Sam Kinison is a shot of Bill Hicks. And these guys are fucking brilliant. And Carlin there's Sam, who will later meet his demise on a highway to Las Vegas. Uh, Dennis Leary, who I know was another one of these angry comics, but they were funny. They were using this anger. Dice Clay was another one. It was a whole movement of outrageous, loud, boisterous comics who were sticking it to people, and they were not political. But they were just as savage as Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul, but in their loud, boisterous way. So Carlin makes it a point to yell. I'm not even making this up. He alters his act where he is going to yell louder than them and be angrier than them. That's how competitive Carlin is. He makes it a point to start yelling at the audience because of these guys to beat them at their own game. It's really crazy. And he alters his entire performance. And when you see him, I want to say some of his shows like 1988, What Am I Doing Here? And What Am I Doing in New Jersey? His sixth HBO special. He's screaming at people, yelling at them. It's insane. And it's called the angry period among comedy historians of George Carlin. And it's really hard to listen to. It's not funny. The writing is tight. The writing is really, it's all there, but it's so anal and so angry and so loud. He's not Sam Kinison, but he's trying, and he worships Sam Kinison. Kinison couldn't care less about him, but he worships Kinison, and he begins to yell and distance himself from the human race. He says, I no longer identify with my species. I haven't for a long time. I identify with carbon atoms. And he begins to create a persona for himself where he says, I am reinventing the world because I can. To be intensely alone, intensely myself, in control of everything, the center of the self-created universe. My job is making up things that aren't and telling people that they are. That's what I do What greater freedom can there be? And he says, so long as you're down there and I'm up here, freedom is what I say goes. And then he ends up with, to say the world is upside down, it's not what you think at all. It's my world. I invented it. Fuck you. This is what he's yelling from the stage. And it's kind of shocking because of where he came from. But this is, again, not an accident, but he's also, uh, coked out of his mind. In 1992, he does Jammin' in New York, which he says is his favorite HBO special. To me, it's unwatchable. Again, this is me. You may have a different opinion. I respect that. It's just difficult for me to watch this guy who is now a different person yelling from the stage in Madison Square Garden in 1992. He does a piece called "The Planet Is Fine," and this piece sends up environmentalists, and it's really way ahead of its time. It's just not funny, and part of the problem with these shows is they're just not funny. And he attacks environmentalists, saying that the planet has survived billions of years without you, and plastic bottles. To sum it up, it goes on for a long time. Plastic bottles and tin cans are not going to destroy the planet Earth, and he's right. He is right. But they did not want to hear this in 1992. I mean, this is the beginning of the fledgling, as we now know, climate change movement. And his own daughter tries to poo poo it. A lot of the lefties try to poo poo this thing, but he reveres this piece called "The Planet Is Fine." And he, to his death, said it was one of my finest pieces. And if you want to hear that, it's on Jammin' in New York, HBO special from the Fell Forum, 1992. Now, okay, so for years they've been trying to get him into a sitcom. And Fox in 1994, 1993, 1994 contacts him, and they have a sitcom for him called The George Carlin Show. And they take Sam Simon. You go, well, who's Sam Simon to run this thing as a showrunner? Sam Simon created shows called Cheers, The Simpsons, Taxi, Tracy Ullman. And this is a photo of George from the George Carlin show. It's in a bar, and he reluctantly does it because his wife, Brenda, is now dying of cancer or has cancer. His wife is now in AA. She saved her life. She was taken to St. Joseph, Santa Monica Hospital. There's Rocco. She was taken to Santa Monica Hospital and then joined AA, and then became a fixture in West Side LA AA for many years until her death. Um, and he didn't. He kept using. She told him you can't do coke in the house, so he did it outside. I mean, it's just one of these silly rules. But he hooks up with Sam Simon. Now, Sam Simon, like I said, is the biggest fish in the bowl. And he does not get along with Sam Simon. Why? He has no idea how a sitcom works. He has no idea of what he calls the secret language of sitcoms, the storyboards, the whole thing that Larry Charles will later do with Seinfeld. He's clueless, and he believes that they're conspiring against him. They're out to get him. They won't let him creatively be part of the show because he doesn't know how to do this. It's not just creatively writing things down. I mean, there's a whole secret world of how to do a sitcom that Sam Simon knows. Anyway, they do about 27 shows. It goes for almost 2 years. And all he wants to do is get fired again. He can't work with others. He says that I have to work alone. He can't be in groups. He hates groups. He doesn't care what group it is. Because he's not in charge. He's a control freak. And he says the only time I feel comfortable with a group is when I'm controlling the group. If he's in a group, he's not controlling the group. So he hates groups. But if he's in front of the group doing a bit or a show with 2,500 people, he loves groups. I mean, the guy is a misanthrope. I don't even know what other word to describe it, other than a drug addict. And drug addicts have these crazy views, which come and go unless you die or get sober. may or may not, you know, occur. In 1995, the show gets canceled, and now he is, he's done. Don't forget, he's done Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in 1989. He did The Prince of Tides in 1991, where he really goes to work on Prince of Tides with Barbara Streisand and Nick Nolte. He does Dogma in 99. He does Jersey Girl in 2004. So he's doing these bit parts. This is with Kevin Smith here, obviously, for Dogma. And Kevin Smith worships him. And I mean, these are like feeding his ego. They're low budget indies and stuff like that. But he does feel comfortable in a group of actors on the set. So that's another group that tolerates him, and he tolerates them because there's makeup people. He's the center of attention when he's about to do his bit. He begins to create a film for himself. He says, "I got to make my own film." So what he comes up with is a thing called the Illustrated George Carlin, and he starts this years before. He puts in millions of dollars into this thing, and what it is a concert film, and it would interstitially have cartoons of the bits as cartoons. There's some of it you could find online, just the cartoons have survived. But he put millions of dollars into this, George, and eventually had to pull the plug and eat all the money. And they say, don't put your own money into your projects. This is why. He does he does a miniseries, Straight to Laredo, Larry McMurtry, a Doves thing, with James Garner, Sissy Spacek, and Sam Shepard. In 1995, he plays a character named Billy Williams. It's a western, and he is great. I watched this last week. Let me tell you something. He is fucking great as this character in this miniseries. It's a Lonesome Dove series. Part of it's a spinoff to the Lonesome Dove stuff. It's called Streets of Laredo, with James Garner as a bounty hunter, and he is fantastic in this thing. So he really is beginning to get chops as an actor, because at the beginning he doesn't know what to do or anything, and but the parts are far and in between. I mean, he is. I recommend this to anyone. It's a mini series. He's in there all throughout, and it's got stars throughout the whole thing. But he wants to do a one man show on Broadway. So he's got a million characters in his head that we've all heard, and you would think that this guy would be able to do a one man show on Broadway doing all his characters like many other performers. But he says he doesn't have the courage, and he never had the courage to do it. With all his drugs and creativity and everything else, he couldn't muster the creative courage, which was his dream, was to do this one man show on Broadway. He couldn't pull it off. And obviously, the reason he couldn't pull it off because of drugs and alcohol. And the drugs and alcohol, eventually, despite what people think that he quit doing cocaine, which is true, he switches, as they say, chairs on the deck of the Titanic and switches to $200 bottles of wine and Vicodin. He steals his wife's Vicodin that she has for her cancer. His wife dies, Brenda, gets breast cancer. Her liver was shot from alcohol. 1997, she finally dies from cancer of the liver. And he's stealing her Vicodin out of the medicine cabinet and taking it himself. 6 a day, he says, which means usually the mathematics as a drug counselor we usually multiply by 5. So he's taking about 30 a day. And he complains about this. Now, in 2004, first of all, when she dies in 1997, the daughter goes crazy. He not even there. He flies back, and they keep her on life support just so he can say goodbye. But she's already dead. But her eyes are open weirdly, and tears are coming from her eyes. And he takes out a tissue and wipes her eyes that are tearing with the tissue, and he saves the tissue in a cigar box forever. But the daughter is devastated. Kelly's devastated. Her father is really, according to her, unemotional in life, because she has all kinds of drug problems. Maybe there's a picture of her as a teenager. She just a train wreck of a rich, spoiled, wealthy Brentwood kid going to Crossroads, private schools, drug, multiple abortions, the whole train wreck of this wealthy hanging out with Brat Pack kids and growing up here in West LA. It's a cliche, but she is a cliche. Not to blame her, she's raised by wolves. But she's a train wreck on top of it. Now her mother succumbs to cancer in 1997. They were married for 36 years, and she was the love of his life. There's no doubt about it. However, the guy was so detached from human emotion that it was hard to see any love between the two of them for the last number of years. Uh, 6 months, I think it's 6 months. Well, Carlin said as a kid, he always used Ritalin. 6 months after he meets her, he's in a bookstore in West LA, in Dutton's bookstore, and he meets a girl there with her dog Spot. 40-ish woman, uh, former TV writer, looks exactly like his wife. And it's only 6 months after his wife has died. And this woman, Sally Wade, will be his companion for the rest of his life. 10 years, a picture of Sally Wade here. Um, really a doll. I mean, she wrote a wonderful book called Love Letters from Carlin or George and her love letters, and it's all a bunch of post-its that is fascinating. And she was a failed TV writer, I guess, in the 80s or something. But um, he says to her in the bookstore, he says, "My wife just died. I can't go out with you. If you're still interested, let's get together in a year," which is what they do. And stay together the rest of their lives. He never marries her. He calls her his wife because he doesn't know what else to call her. Here's a cover of the book, in case people want to read it or buy it. The George Carlin Letters by Sally Wade. It's a fascinating book. But for those who believe that Carlin was an atheist and hated God, you may want to think twice about that, because on page 216 of his own autobiography, he is driving to Dayton from Detroit, I think it is. And well, not this, so I'll get to that in a second, but uh, there is a passage where he crashes his car, his nose is smashed in, he's unconscious, he's drunk, and he says, "But God jumped in once again. It's 2 in the morning when I crash. I'm bleeding profusely and I'm unconscious." Now, that's his words. Of course, this was written by George Carlin, a great autobiography by Carlin called Last Words, which I highly recommend. It's co-written with Tony Hendra, who was also an original National Lampoon editor, who is British and one of the great comic minds of the post-World War II era. Uh, the book is based on their conversations that he tape recorded intentionally to release this book. Now, the point I'm trying to make is in 2004, he gets addicted or admits that he's addicted to Vicodin and wine. And he takes out a press release and he calls up his daughter, literally, that he's going to check into Promises in Malibu. And Promises in Malibu, which is not there anymore, was the number one 12-step quality rehab in California, Southern California. There was Betty Ford outside of that, and then Hazleton in Minnesota. Those are like the gold standard, the top three. And Promises checks in, does 30 days in there, and begins to develop a conscious contact with a higher power. And for people who don't believe that, you can you're going to have to, because there's strong evidence about it. The thing we were just showing, this is from her book, from Sally Wade. He refers to himself as a lapsed agnostic. This is when he gets out. He may have done it before then, but there was a special emphasis afterward with an annoying glance at Sally. He leaves himself open to all other options. I've seen him pray at night, kneeling beside his bed, out loud. But while George Carlin prayer is sincere, it's unlike any other. There are few biblical references, and God knows him as Mr. Wade. He calls himself Mr. Wade, which is her last name. so word won't get out to his atheist followers. He says, God, Mr. Wade here, you probably haven't been listening to me lately, and you really screwed up that one simple thing I asked you to do yesterday. But here we are again, and I'm ready to give you another chance. That's what a great guy I am. So he's sarcastically praying to God, and his wife overhears him doing this. People can't wrap their minds around the fact that from 2004 and 2008, in that period, George had 4 years of sobriety. And ironically, he called his drug period 1937 to 2004, which is pretty funny because his entire life he did drugs. And he said, what is important is that I developed a new appreciation of the AA technique that had helped Brenda so much. Whatever skepticism I had about them or the people who use them, and that they worked, although I can do without the higher power stuff, he began to become part of a 12-step program in LA and was a fixture until his death in 2008 from his heart attacks. And the reason I know it was true is because I gave George Carlin 3 of those birthday cakes to celebrate at least 3 years of his sobriety in my own meeting with George, a men's meeting, private men's meeting we used to go to together with other people in show business. And George came around at the end and became a different person. The George on stage is an act. That's not the person that I knew. Person that I knew was sweet and quiet and sincere, humble, helpful, believed in God. Whatever his manifestation of God is was his. That's all that is required in these programs, or really nothing. You could use the group or be an atheist, but he eventually came to believe in a power greater than himself, and it changed his life. And the reason I know that is because I was there. And I was there in 2005 and 2006 and 2007. And then he passed away in 2008. And it wasn't until, and this is my personal commentary, I guess. I think he would have loved COVID, which is kind of a sick joke, but I think Carlin would have loved to experience what we all did out here during COVID. Um, but that being said, Carlin, um, there was a documentary that came out in 2022 by Judd Apatow about Carlin, which I think we saw it's George Carlin's American Dream. And Judd Apatow has now taken over this space, and he'll decide what your life story is about in comedy. And he will intentionally leave out the fact that in 2004, George Carlin checked into Promises, and it was publicly known because he took an ad out. He released a press release that he was going in there. Judd Apatow feels that this is not worthy to be in his multi-hour, multi-part, massive documentary on George Carlin because he feels it shames him and embarrasses him and minimizes him, I guess, in his mind. And he has no reference to the sober Carlin. He has no reference to Carlin going into rehab in 2004, which I find to be bizarre. So it makes you think, folks, when you watch these documentaries that are completely tell-all documentaries, they're not. They're not. Documentaries are not truth. They're shaped by the people who make them, as we already know. But for some reason, Judd Apatow felt that this was a bridge too far to focus on the fact that in the last 4 years of his life on Earth, he was sober for the first time in his life, and it changed his entire life. This is not important to Judd Apatow, and as I said, is not in this complete quintessential HBO documentary in 2 parts from 2022, George Carlin's American Dream. It leaves all of that out, and it leaves it out intentionally because everyone knew he was in rehab, and he let everyone know that he went to rehab, and he let everyone know he was proud to be a graduate from 30 Days and Promises. It's in his daughter's book, and Kelly's in the documentary many times. And the fact that she allowed this to happen is highly suspect. I don't know why she allowed this documentary to come out with that when they were using her book so freely. This is Kelly Carlin, who's now either a therapist or a Jungian TED talker or something. I'm not really sure what she is, but the fact of the matter is, I only knew the George Carlin from the 2004 on, so I don't know the sickness of George Carlin, but I know a lot of people who were that guy, and he it shapes your life, it shapes your material, and it clearly shaped his after 1995 ish, where he becomes this angry older man just ranting from the stage. And it's hard to watch. I know people say it's great. It's garbage to me. I'm sorry. I know he has, and believe me, before that, this stuff, I mean, is revered. But nevertheless, I mean, he is a different kind of stand up comic. He is not like Pryor. He is not like Lenny. He is his own thing. And nobody, Seinfeld kind of covers him in a way with observational humor, but Carlin and his system that he has of putting a show together, he told me he has, he was doing his last HBO special. And he told me he couldn't memorize the stuff anymore. It took him 2 years. That's why the shows were 2 years apart. He would write a show and spend 2 years memorizing it block by paragraph by paragraph. And he would record himself doing it audio wise. And the words that he missed, he would circle them on the script and then just record him saying those words until he got the entire paragraph right from memory. And he told me the last one was killing him, the last HBO special. He was just having incredible difficulty trying to memorize the entire 2 hours. Think about how insane that is. But that's the system that he created. No improvisation, no ad libbing, no movement other than actually timing it to the second with a stopwatch. It's just a crazy. I mean, the guy was a mad genius, without a doubt, but it was a crazy anal HDHD, way of doing comedy. It just seemed like, a guy named Chris Rush, who used to work at Lampoon, who also was a comic, called him a member of the Third Reich lovingly. And he gave money to Chris Rush to write a screenplay, gave him like $18,000 one day. And Chris Rush said, "I don't think you're Irish at all. I think you're German from the Third Reich, creative wise." He was so anal retentive on how he did this stuff. I'm surprised that he didn't get cancer. But it worked. What can you say? It worked. I mean, so many Grammys, so many awards, so many gold albums. The guy was a workaholic. He worked till the day he died. Just a fanatic about this stuff. You know, um, I'll tell you this: he was enamored with Kinnison, and Kinnison was not enamored with him. And when Kinnison died, he sent the funeral home or wherever he sent this, like 10 million bushels of roses and flowers. Where Bill Kinnison, he called him up and he said, "Bill, I'm sorry about your brother's loss. And I sent these flowers, and I believe your brother is sending me bits from the afterlife," which is something you don't want to hear. Your brother's just dead on the side of the road in Vegas. But Carlin sent these flowers to Kinnison, and Bill Kinnison had to tell him that he was not his number one fan. He worshipped Richard Pryor, so it was not a mutual respect thing. In fact, he was degraded in one piece by Sam Kinison, saying, "Get Gallagher or get Carlin if you don't want me at this hotel in Vegas." But we'll get into that when we do the Sam Kinison, the Secret Life of Sam Kinison. Some of these will overlap because the people did know each other, but the situation regarding Kinison and him was interesting. He hated dice, but yeah, this is an interesting. This was written by a Boston Globe reporter. Very good book about some of the subjects we covered here. I'll put the links down below of the various books and as much stuff as I can. There's so much stuff on Carlin because of the 60-year career and the fact that he came around learning from radio. He really did not get raised from TV. He learned from radio because he was born in 1937. And that's why he became a radio guy, was because there was no TV yet. And when TV came about, he grew up with TV alongside with TV growing up. So he was in our lives, our entire lives, at least in my family. You know, the DJ stuff just was so pervasive that it kind of went into his stand-up act when he was doing all those different sound effects and everything else. And when you listen to Class Clown today, it really is a lot of amalgamation of Spike Jones and some other sound effects type comedians from the 1940s. He was not adverse to borrowing stuff from other comics. The 7 words that you can't say on television, Lenny Bruce had 9 of them in a performance that Lenny was not alive when this album came out. Yeah, this is Class Clown. This is where the 7 words you can't say on television comes from. It's also his Class Clown story of what he did in class. He drops out in the 7th or 8th grade. Maybe he made the 9th grade. I take that back. I think he made it to the 9th grade and he dropped out. And that's when he joins the Air Force at the age of 15. I don't know how you do it, but that's what he did. And he was, I'll put it this way, they go to England, his unit of the Air Force is like brand new. And they take these B-47s and they go on a mission to England, and they land in England, and it's just a drill, to take fly all our B-47s over to England, and it's 1955. The Dodgers beat the Yankees. He gets drunk as a skunk, passes out in the cockpit of one of the B-47s that's on the ground, drops his weapon onto the tarmac, and was one of the next court martials he had, and the the sergeant said, "What did you do it for?" He said, "The Dodgers beat the Yankees." And he says, "Well, who cares?" He says, "Obviously, you don't." And he just gets into a screaming match with the superior officer, and he got some sort of release that was some weird numerical release where they both he summed it up as a mutual agreement to go in separate directions between the Air Force and him. It wasn't an honorable discharge, but it wasn't dishonorable. It was some code that allowed you to go on with your life, which he quickly did and moved into being a DJ. So, um, and the rest, my friends, is history. And that is part or good part of the secret life of George Carlin. Um, the influence of George Carlin in American comedy is huge, simply because he did it for 60 years and he altered his style and he was in so many different mediums. But he considered himself a writer first. He wrote his own material when people didn't. He wrote every single thing. He wrote these books, he wrote these articles, and uh, the guy had something spectacular, marred, obviously, and influenced by drugs. They worked for him for a long time until, like everybody else, they turned on him. And he, at least at the end, he did it his way. Put it that way. He's a Frank Sinatra of comedy. He definitely did it his way. Let me just put it. I'll put it like that as we end this segment on George Carlin's Secret Life. But we have a little something to show you. This is the coffee that keeps me going. This is grown by pygmies in Papua New Guinea, a tribe of pygmies, which I guess is their only way to survive, these pygmies. Whether it's espresso, a cappuccino, or a plunger, you will enjoy the hand selected, perfectly roasted bean over and over and again. Tribal coffee. Again, here's a logo for it. You get 10% off with the Mark G secret code. Don't abuse it. Use it to get the coffee. Try one bag. Get it ground. It's so flavorful. There's no flavors. This is just the coffee itself. Western Highlands coffee. I think coffee is like South African for coffee, right? Yeah, it's got the logo here. PMG Specialty Coffee. PNG. This stuff is gold, my friends. from Papua New Guinea, the Western Highlands, in case you want to pinpoint it. It's because, from what I understand, the fertile volcanic soils that somehow mix with the dirt, becoming a very fertile soil. It sounds bizarre, but this is how this coffee is made, and I cannot push it enough because I like it and I hate everything else. It switched me off of Folgers. So try a bag of tribal coffee. Tell them I sent you. You get 10% off with the code Mark G. And you could try the biltong once again. If you want to try the biltong, you could use my name. Tell them I sent you. And you could sit there watching sports events with a bag of biltong and this coffee, and you'll be good to go. Um, and you won't have any complaints. That being said, we're going to be back next week. And I believe, if everything goes correctly, we're going to have Jackie Martlin, Martling, aka the Joke Man. If you like and subscribe, you'll get a special place in heaven. I don't know how this works. I didn't know how it worked on the other channel. I don't know how it works here. But apparently, likes and subscribing will allow me to get bigger guests. Right now, the ones I'm getting are dead or retired. So if you like and subscribe to the channel, you may see names that you that are currently performing. Um, that being said, we're going to have Jackie on, I presume, next Wednesday, and we're going to go over the Howard Stern career that Jackie was such a big part of, and my relationship with Jackie, of course, at the Friars Club and in my office, and his jokes and his career that's still ongoing right now. 1-800 Joke Man or something. This guy's got an AOL account. It's from 1981. So next Wednesday, Jackie the Joke Man on this Bat channel right here at 6 p.m. If something comes up, I'll put it on Twitter. But you could follow me on X at Lordbuckly. And you can go to tomorrow on at 5:30 Eastern with Eric on America's Untold Stories. Lollapalooza Tuesday or Newsapalooza Tuesday. Newsapalooza Tuesday tomorrow. Yeah, at 5:30 Eastern. Oh no, that's backwards. Friday will be on with Freeform Friday. We already did Newsapalooza yesterday. Friday will be Freeform Friday. Believe me, we can't even fit these stories in. We're so dizzy with the amount of stories that we're trying to cover on those two news shows. It's crazy. But we'll try to squeeze in some Kennedy stuff on a Tuesday as well, and then we'll be in Dallas, as we pointed out, November 22nd. I hope to see a lot of people there in Dallas, which is a blast. I don't have the information in front of me, but we'll do it on Friday. We'll plug it. You could buy tickets there. But I hope you like this. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like it down below. Maybe I should do this at the front end of the show. I'm not really sure what works, what doesn't. But if you like this, come back next week. Tell your friends. We're going to get into a lot of these secret lives because they're interesting to me. We're going to do Jonathan Winters. A lot of weird guys we're going to get into. We'll do Richard Pryor and stuff, and some of the bigger names. But I think we'll have some fun with it coming up, and then we'll put in guests in between. You know, because it's hard to book them every week and do a show every week. So I'm going to mix it up, mix and match. Anyway, I think that's it. I think I'm going to have to get out of here at this time. It's been a couple hours of doing this. Yeah, it's almost 2 hours. So I hope you like this and tell your friends.